You're welcome along to the polling station. We have the latest on Partygate. 50 more Downing Street COVID fines issued. It is Thursday morning. We're going to reflect on the general election, what happened across the UK. And we've two by-elections, and we know that the lads get very jiggy about by-elections. We've two by-elections with the Conservatives 7-4 in one and 7s in the other on Star Sports. It's been an interesting week, and I see on BBC's page today, hard to see a way back for Putin, says PM, which I actually thought read, hard to see a way back for PM, says Putin, but I got that wrong. Good morning, gentlemen.
Hello, Johnny.
Hello.
How are you, William?
I'm very well, thank you. Very well indeed.
It's fair to say the live polling station was very well received last week.
Indeed it was. Thank you, everybody, by the way, for the amazing feedback we had and the incredible participation. Really grateful for it. We'll look to do stuff like that in the future. There'll be lots of events of that kind. So yes, watch this space. Watch this live space.
Who knew that the local elections could be so popular in so many weird and wacky countries around the world?
I know, it was amazing.
Most people in England couldn't care about them.
Well, you see, that's what we do. We're so engaged, and we get that back from our fans tenfold. So yes, big thanks to everybody who did stay up and come through with us, including it was about 20 people who I'm pretty sure were present for like combined, what do you do, about 15 hours? Yeah, literally. Wow. 15 hours.
And all 20 have now been sectioned.
Indeed, but we'll get them out. We'll get them out in time for. I'm hoping we might do something for France or whatever, or Australia actually, which is not too far away, I think. So yeah, really pleased with it, and thanks very much for your support. By the way, if you are watching this and you haven't subscribed to Star Sports, please do on YouTube. We absolutely love it when you're there, and there's lots of other interesting stuff too.
Yeah, we have a couple of by-elections. We have a lot of revised betting in light of the general election. Just starting with you, Paul, what did you make of it? It was more or less in line with our thoughts in terms of the local election. Northern Ireland went, I think, the way that we all expected as well. Fascinating times there. Your thoughts?
Well, it was in line, but it was actually worse for the Tories. I mean, they did a remarkably good job of changing the subject very quickly, right? But look at the actual forecast. The expert forecasts were for between 200 to 300 losses, right? Colin Rawlings, the guru of local election, said 300 to 400 max, and they've ended up losing 496, was it? Well, 487, sorry. It's an absolute catastrophic result for the Conservatives. We're also seeing further information coming through from Tiverton and Honiton that suggests the same thing, that Boris Johnson has completely lost the core Tory vote, that even Brexit voting Tories have had enough and they're prepared to vote with Dem in a protest. So, yeah, I think it's absolutely catastrophic for Johnson, and I think more to come.
Catastrophic for Johnson, Neil?
I think you're right. I think it was pretty much what we expected. Obviously, I think, Paul's definitely right. The numbers were slightly worse for the Tories than people were predicting. The numbers were also worse for Labour than people were predicting. Labour have sort of managed to, both of the main parties have managed to spin themselves to death over the whole thing. For once, it's not the Lib Dems that are lying about elections, really, out of the three main parties. The Lib Dems actually, had a really good night. And actually, we haven't really heard that much from them, whereas we've heard a lot from Labour saying that, we're finally back, we're climbing a mountain, we're turning a corner. All these things have been said by them half a dozen times in the last 2 years. If they were kind of lucky in the way the results fell, because they got the wins in ones with Barnet and Westminster being around about 11-4, I think it was a bit of it. So that was definitely a bit of a shock, quite early in the evening. Ridiculously, the Blairite Labour Council in Croydon rented the hall to do the count for 7,000 from a private school. The Labour Party paid $7,000 to a private school, and then they didn't know that the kids would be in there on the Friday, so they couldn't because they had to do the mayor count and the council count. They got kicked out. They had to come back. Then the kids were doing something on Saturday morning, so they had to come back Saturday evening. They didn't finish the count until Sunday. So we didn't find out that they'd lost Croydon Council, lost the Croydon Mayor, lost the Tower Hamlets Mayor, lost the Tower Hamlets Council, and lost the Harrow Council. which basically cancelled out all the gains in terms of number of councillors that they'd got in the big three that they won early in the evening. So from their spinning point of view, that was really lucky, because most people had given up looking at the local council results by sort of the end of Friday, and a lot of the other results didn't really come in until later. Most of their wins came in Wales, of course, where the King of the Valleys is still very popular. The Greens did okay in Wales as well, and the Tories did badly there. In Scotland, Labour were boasting a lot that they got into second place, but really, again, that was just a catastrophic disaster for the Tories. I think the Tories lost like 7%, whereas Labour gained sort of 1% or something. I may have got those numbers slightly wrong, but it's that sort of region, and they just edged in front of the Tories. But more by the Tories going backwards than them going forward.
Yeah, I think if we could just cut that clip where you just explained about the school and put that out in socials, would do well. But there are parallels there, William, in what Neil is saying about Labour kind of, Labour is basically feeding off the carcass of the Tory party at the moment. And the Nationalists, as much as it was a historic election in Northern Ireland where Sinn Féin is the leading party for the first time and so on and so forth, the Nationalist vote in 100 years since partition has effectively plateaued. So like Sinn Féin can celebrate and all that, but those who are pro-unity can point out to the fact that the middle, which in this case is the Lib Dems in Britain, the middle is actually doing better, whereas nationalism and Labour did okay at this election, but the Conservatives had a shocker, and which I'm looking at here and I can't get my head around. Boris Johnson is still 5 to 6 not to be leading them at the next election.
Yeah,
sorry, Gordon.
So the reason behind that, I think, is sort of twofold. First of all,
how bad the actual party is without him. How bad, the race is to replace him.
Yeah, I think that's definitely feeding into it partly. We've gone in quite a short amount of time from having sort of one person or two people who I think most observers thought would be in the final two, to now having what looks like a much more wide open race. And I think there will be a bit of concern about having a leadership election that gives a messy outcome. I also think just regarding sort of the change overall, or sort of him being pushed out, I do think that the timing of the results sort of did help him a little bit, in the sense that the big narrative of the election's first night was actually that Labour had done really well in London, but really poorly elsewhere. And then 24 hours or 12 hours later, it started to become much more clear that the Tories had just been thumped from all angles for a variety of, well, not different reasons, but the same reasons. I think they were really, really bad for him. The only issue is that I think there are quite a few people in the Conservative Party, including MPs, who either believe in Johnson or are so sort of attached to him that they don't fancy their chances with anybody else yet, that they haven't yet pushed the button. And of course, any plotters or whatever, do they believe they have to support to go to the 22 and get over the line?
Isn't part of the answer that, it didn't matter how many councillors they lost in the election, Boris Johnson was not going to resign over the local elections.
Yeah.
And if you were a person who hasn't yet put your letter into the 1922 committee, is the council elections going to be the thing that sways you to do it? I don't think so. So effectively, with the council elections out of the way, it's a hurdle that some people thought might trip him up that's now gone. And the Partygate thing, because he's, it's becoming a bit of a kind of a problem for both parties, rightly or wrongly, and whatever you think about, personally, I think ABBA-themed parties is a lot worse than, having a beer while you're doing some work in the office. But what it has done is muddied the waters for a lot of people. And, the Tories and the press have done a good job of that. Personally, I think Starmer's been a hypocrite, and he's been sanctimonious. I can't stand that. But irrespective of that, he clearly hasn't organised a series of parties, some of which are ABBA themed. But the public now think that both people are breaking the rules. I see that just now, actually, literally in the last hour, it's back to 2-1 on the exchanges Johnson to go in 2022. That's the first time we've seen that level in possibly 4 weeks now, I think. You know, it did get back down to 2.2, perhaps about 10 days before the locals. And so it's been a consistent drift really since the day before the locals.
Yeah,
get on, take those on.
Well, actually,
it's
like
just
Paul,
gone. Actually, it just went. Was that you, Paul? Somebody just had 200 quid on, literally.
No,
as we were speaking.
no commission,
Down
anything like that.
feed to
15 to 8
Australia.
with 15 to 8 with Star Sports 2022 and 7 to 2 2023 and still 10 to 11 2024 later. Well, if we get to you go over to you, Paul, in terms of the first of all Partygate, which I think, as Neil says, has some kind of muddied the waters somewhat unfairly, but also say the two by-elections, which the Conservatives are overwhelmingly likely to lose both. Where does he go from here?
Well, first of all, just on Partygate and Beergate, the only people it's muddied the waters for are the media. Right? I mean, we've got polls out today. YouGov just published something a couple of hours ago about Keir Starmer reputation. Nothing's changed. You know, partisans who want it to be bad for Starmer are saying it's terrible for Starmer. There's no evidence that it's actually moving anyone. And, you know, ultimately, this is a delaying tactic. Unless Starmer is fined, right, it's going to be a big damp squib that will probably just highlight the fact that the whole thing was conjured up by a Tory spinner to change the subject. Meanwhile, number 10 Downing Street is now like the most fined household in the country, right? They are in massive trouble, and the results were much worse than expected. There's a pincer movement across the country where people are doing whatever they have to do to beat Tory, to beat Boris Johnson up. And now we've got two by-elections coming up that, again, look like they're going to be hammered. I mean, another thing today was we had a thread from James Johnson, who is a Tory pollster, right, used to work for them. And he's been taking focus groups in Tiverton and Wakefield, and he's talking about Brexit voting Tories and saying that, you know, there's just no support for Boris Johnson. They're going to get another hiding there. And so, you know, it's death by 1,000 cuts. And whether they're
going to get a hiding there, a hiding in Tiverton and Wakefield.
I think it's another North Shropshire.
So 2 to 5 the Lib Dems.
It does look. It is pretty amazing, isn't it? This we haven't spoken about Tiverton and Wakefield on the polling station yet because there's been so much else going on in the last couple of weeks. But Neil Parish, you know, the tractor man, has got he had a 20,000 majority. Now, 20,000 majority puts it in the North Shropshire territory. I think the betting, you can remind me, Paul, the betting on North Shropshire for the Lib Dems opened about 12 to 1. Is that right?
Apologies, hold on. Pause.
It was about 3, 4 to 1.
It was 3.
But it
quite
didn't
quickly.
last, though, did it? But if you remember, I mean,
you're right. I was thinking of Chesham and Amersham was 12 to 1. I think North Shropshire opened 7 to 2.
It was not. It was maybe 4 to 1, 9 to 2 for a place. Yeah, initially.
Yeah, if you remember that though, it was an insane bet. When
it was a tremendous betting.
It went to odds on, then it went back out again. Then on the night, it was back.
Crazy. It was totally crazy. I asked a bunch of people how they would bet on it before we saw any prices, before the guy resigned. And I got people guessing, and these are all quite smart gamblers who follow politics. And the guesses range between the Tories being 4 to 6 to the Tories being 2 to 1.
Yeah.
Nobody really had a clue. And then a couple of firms went up, and of course everybody had a bit of a copy, and the exchange market sort of fell in around the prices that the firms had gone. It's sort of solidified now to the Lib Dems 2 to 1 on, the Tories 7 to 4, and pretty much 100 to 1 bar the 2. It is a bit amazing. A 20,000 majority, 2 to 1 on. I've got a friend who works in the gambling industry. He works for Star Sports from time to time, Simon Knott. And he lives in Tiverton. And I would guess, I don't really know, but I would guess he probably votes Tory. He said to me, this is the best bet I've ever seen. And I've had my biggest ever bet.
2 to 5, effectively.
Yeah. No, he's taken the Tories at 2 to 1, I think he got.
Okay, sorry.
I'm a Lib Dem backer. I think it's North Shropshire again.
I think it's a great betting heat, though, isn't it? Big opinions both ways.
But I think what we will have, absolutely, like North Shropshire was, right? And we'll have all of this. We back and forth about has it overreacted. But ultimately, if you take North Shropshire, they didn't just win it; they won it easy. Just the same as Chesham and Amersham, they won it easy.
I tell you what, there's another.
It's very hard to get your voters out in by-elections if you're a government.
I tell you what, there's another big factor here that makes this constituency quite different to North Shropshire. So this was the Labour vote in the last 4 times since Neil Parish became the MP there. 2010, Labour got 4,900. 2015, Labour got 6,800. 2017, Labour got 15,670. And last time out, 2019, Labour was second with 11,654. There was nothing like that in North Shropshire. In North Shropshire, the numbers were like 2,000 each time.
Hang on. Were they second in North Shropshire? Because we had this whole thing where the Labour Party didn't give up and they kept on campaigning.
Maybe I got that wrong. Well, Chesham and Amersham, they definitely had no votes, Labour. But there's
collapse.
It's very clear that Labour are not trying in this election, and a lot of those people are going to vote Lib Dem. So it's not just going to have to be converting lots of Tories. It's just going to be a sort of dual get out the vote kind of operation.
How insane! 35,893 first preferences the last election. Lib Dems 8,800, and the Lib Dems are 2 to 5. Incredible.
It's mad, isn't it? In some ways, yeah. If you hadn't seen North Shropshire and you saw this, you'd think, "What the hell's going on?"
There's a southwest phenomenon. This I think you will find if you go back over many decades in the southwest. You go back to the days of the Liberal SDP alliance, even, and then to the Blair years. There is a big correlation in the southwest between Labour and Lib Dem votes tactically, and it's a case of where, like to take the 2017 example, what's happened there is those people have decided that Labour were far likelier challenger. So Labour vote goes right up. I think, as you say, I think the Labour vote will collapse here, and I think they'll win it quite easily.
The Conservatives are toxic at the moment under Johnson, effectively.
Absolutely, that's what it is. And look, let's be honest. I mean, it isn't just any government, any incumbent government is going to struggle to get its vote in a midterm by-election. That's a basic fundamental of politics. Let alone one that's very unpopular and where the news cycle is so.
I mean, I think that was really the story of the local elections. People didn't really switch Tory to Labour. They either switched Tory to Lib Dem if that was possible in their area, or Tory to stay at home. And that's probably what's going to happen in North Shropshire.
2 to 5, the Liberal.
Not North Shropshire. Where are we now? Tiverton and
down in Devon. So 2 to 5, William, Lib Dems, despite having a colossal gap from the last 2019 election. And according to Paul, and I'd imagine a lot of others, is probably buying money.
Yeah, I mean, on the current trends, I think the one thing we should remember is, yes, the majority is very big, but that would have come nationally when I think the Tories won. They think they won by about 10 points, right, percentage-wise. I think that was what the gap was in 2019. That's been massively reversed. So it's not as if they are. Hypothetically, yes, you're climbing that mountain, but in reality, it's been leveled.
Well, but you say that, but 2017 was a hung parliament, and Neil Parish won by 20,000 votes. I mean, this is a pretty safe seat, generally speaking.
Yeah. Okay. I have been schooled on that quickly. But in all seriousness, the phenomenon Paul's describing looks to me to be correct, and I think, it sounds a bit odd to be saying it of a seat that's been so solidly Tory, but I didn't have any sort of quarrels with the price of 2 to 5 when we went up. I didn't think it was too short or unreasonable by any stretch of the imagination, which sort of shows you how far along we've come. And what we have to remember is like a relatively short space of time politically. Like, this has not happened over a really long period of time. I can still remember sort of going to count North Shropshire. I can still remember being there in the days beforehand, and the future electorally looks very bleak for the Conservatives. And whilst some might say, well, they'll chuck Johnson or whatever, a new leader is going to have a lot of these problems as well. They're going to have all of these problems as well, and I'm not exactly sure how they fix basically what's been going wrong for them recently, and there's some stuff that just is very difficult for any government to deal with. Any government will struggle with a cost of living crisis this bad, pressures.
And any government would probably struggle with the Wakefield by-election in terms of winning it back in the circumstances they're in. And we have, by consequence, we have the Conservative 7s, which is possibly the worst 7-1 shot you'll ever get. Labour 1-10. I guess the point here, William, is like between the local elections and the consistent losses, they'll probably lose both of these. Like, how much more can Boris actually take?
I mean, in terms of just sticking it out,
stick it out and wait and see.
He can take it for as long as. I mean, he's got a unique frame of mind for these things, which is the kindest way I can say that he just won't resign because it's not in his nature. So it's basically the onus is going to be on the party for enough people to get sort of really cold feet to push and ditch him. I think also that if they went to the 22, they would really want to be secure, to be absolutely sure of getting the votes needed, for a no confidence vote. Because we remember not that long ago with Theresa May, they went and she won a no confidence vote and they were stuck with them, or stuck with her, or the people who wanted to go on were stuck with her. So I don't have a stronger view on this as others do. I think they're going to get very heavily beaten in those two by-elections. I think that's going to be much harder to spin than the local elections are. I don't think the polls are going to improve for them now and in the future. And I think the only thing that I could see possibly making them want to keep Johnson on might be... Actually, no, I've just made a mistake there because I remember reading that Tory MPs are actually a teensy bit scared of Keir Starmer getting fined and resigning. They believe that Labour might find somebody who is even more effective. So I don't really see where the upside is for him. But then again, that's been the case for...
Sorry.
That's been the case for...
You were stumbling. You were about to say someone who isn't completely useless, and then you switched to even more effective. Can I pick up on a couple of things you just said? First of all, I totally agree with what you said, that if he loses these two by-elections, I think it's way more important than the locals, because most politicians just don't care about local politics, but they much more care about the machinations of Westminster, and Westminster is their obsession. Having said that, the two results are undoubtedly correlated, so you can't really talk about the price on them doing the double. But if you just double up the odds as they are now and assume that there is not much correlation between the two, just to explain that for people that are thinking, what the hell is he talking about? Obviously, if the Tories get hammered in Wakefield, it makes them more likely to get hammered in Tiverton and Honiton.
Related events.
But if you just double up the prices, it's kind of 6-4 on 6-4. Do the double, not do the double. So, you could argue he's 40% to get away with this. If he loses Wakefield but holds on in Tiverton, I'm not saying that things are great for Boris Johnson and he should be having another party,
that's a result
or not. But it would be a way that he could stagger on. Yeah. I'm still optimistic about my bet that he goes next year. And he's definitely not, none of these things are going to make him resign. So it is a question of whether the MPs gang up on him, and they don't seem to be doing it at the moment. The other thing is, of course, you said the polls as well. You said the polls are not improving. There was a YouGov I think it was yesterday, might have been the day before. Labour only 1 point ahead.
Can I just clarify quickly with that? What I meant was that there isn't going to be a direction of travel where I think the Tories would move ahead in averages.
I kind of agree with that, but it is a bit ridiculous, isn't it? The country's on its knees, everybody's skint. Thank God the sun's come out and we can turn the radiators off. Tory MPs are talking about how we need cookery lessons to get us through this. Yet Labour are only 1 point ahead.
Okay, that's one poll, Neil. If it won tomorrow, if it's 10%, could we then say it's a disaster and Labour are 10 points ahead?
No, we can't. No, we can't.
And
Labour should be 20 points ahead.
Yeah,
that's the.
I was promised 20 points ahead, so I'm going to stick with that. Under any other leader, they'd be 2 points ahead.
all of it is very predictable. What is happening? You have a solid 33 to 35% of people who will vote Tory come what may, who blame Labour for every single thing that happens, right, and buy into every talking point. We see it poll after poll, and you have a fairly solid sort of 38, 37 to 39% of a solid Labour. And those people aren't going to move. We're talking about a very small fluctuation. People to
No, I
fluctuate.
agree. I do agree with that. But what I do think is
look,
that
we just had an election where they lost 487 seats.
I get
Paul,
I get all of
the guru of
I remember it. I don't forget. I had to sit with Will Kedjanyi for much of it while he was asleep. But
the scale of it can't be underestimated.
no, but okay, let me make my quick point, because I don't really disagree with anything you just said. But the key thing in terms of the next general election is how the parties turn out their voters. And if Labour can't enthuse anybody to come out, plus they lose a lot of people off the bottom because of the voter ID, and they get stitched up by the boundary changes, they ain't going to win. Not with these kind of polling numbers.
There's a lot of what ifs there, right? There's a lot of what ifs there.
Well, they're not big what ifs. The voter ID is coming in and the boundary changes are coming in.
Right. And we will see what effect those have and in what places it has. But equally, you can look at those results, and the bottom line is we've just had a serious set of results. They were catastrophic for the Conservative Party. They weren't brilliant for Labour, but as Stephen Fisher, another guru of psephology, on the ward-by-ward analysis has said, yes, they are making incremental progress in the red wall, right? It's ward by ward, that is the story. It's not massive progress, but it's enough. And it's enough to take away the majority. All of the seat projections based on last Thursday show Labour clearly as the biggest party, right? Not winning majority, right? I don't see how any of that is not catastrophic for the Conservative Party. And meanwhile, we're seeing, like I say, when I said the polls had moved before, the YouGov thing was about what has beergate affected your view of Keir Starmer. There was virtually no different. Well, because everybody's already in their partisan camps. They've already decided.
Well, that's true. I mean, it hasn't affected my opinion, and I think he's the worst Labour leader I've ever seen.
Just for argument's sake,
Paul, that if they won or lost, that's irrelevant. So with the Tory vote.
If I were a British voter, I don't really know why I would necessarily vote for Labour as somebody who's left wing. I don't really see what the brand is. If Jeremy Corbyn were still leader of Labour, would they have capitalised more on the Conservatives' downfall, or would they have capitalised less?
No, I personally think that what would happen is that they probably would infuse more core Labour voters to vote in a local election, but equally, having a left-wing Labour leader would make it much harder for many of those vast swathe of people in the middle who don't describe themselves as left or right.
Right.
Who all voted Lib Dem in this recent election?
No, we've got to stop Corbyn. Whereas actually they're like, I think Ed Davey is the same thing. Ed Davey and Starmer are in the same boat. It's in the Joe Biden boat, in the vanilla boat.
Yeah.
If you have an unpopular incumbent leader, right, or an incumbent government, the main task is to be not dangerous.
Exactly. Just don't fuck up, basically.
Yeah. And that's what's happening. And I think as long as Labour and the Lib Dems continue in that mode, right, of not offending anybody, of not being particularly
radical politics of 2022.
Yeah. Radical politics affects both sides. You know, the last election, one of the things, a key critical point of the last election was that there were a lot of Remain Tory voters, soft Tory voters who voted for Remain. And when you polled them and you said, what's more important to you, stopping Jeremy Corbyn or stopping Brexit, stopping Jeremy Corbyn polled bigger, right? And that's what made that made it impossible, say, for the Lib Dems to win some of those seats in the Blue Wall in places like Somerset, places like Kent. And I just think the way we're going, we're heading in that direction. Unless the Tories do something quite dramatic, like change leader and possibly change direction, that's where we're going to end up.
I actually, ironically, I think if the Tories are if the Tories latched on to climate change in a very, very strong way, I actually still think they could swing people, because Neil, I don't really see what Labour has to offer me.
Well, I've been with you for quite a long time on that. I don't know. I mean, I feel like when you campaign with the police and crime commissioner of Durham in order to get her elected, and then you ask her to make a decision on whether you're going to get a fine, you probably aren't going to get a fine. So I guess Keir Starmer's not really going to be quitting anytime soon. And, that just means, very boring policies, not very many policies at all. And, we just get left with this guy, who's basically a liar. He lied to his electorate, the membership of the party, in order to be made the Labour leader. And he thinks that sucking up to the Tory press is going to help him. And the first time he's needed, some kind of chance to rely on them, they've decided to stick the knife into him. I don't know. I can only see bad things for Labour if they stick with this guy, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think in fairness, he's not going to get away with the ineptitude of the Prime Minister forever. You have to offer something. You have to become a personality. You have to impose your will on the electorate.
I mean, I wasn't all, like, there were times where I didn't mind Tony Blair, but generally I wasn't a big fan. Well, at least he had a vision. He had some kind of idea of what he wanted to do with the country.
I don't know what
things that he wanted to spell out.
Yeah,
he doesn't want anything.
He'll go into the election they're just doing what any strategist would tell them to do, right?
Well, they've got loads of chances to seize on popular policies.
Right. I mean, I could come up with easily 5 or 6 very, very moderate, centrist, centre-leftish, changes from government policy that would make them more popular than the Tories. For instance, just building a house, the Tories have just dropped their house building plans, commitments again, right? Now, we know that the vast majority, Corbyn had a disastrous election, but he still won amongst every single
he won among under 65, didn't he, basically?
Every group under 65 voted Labour at the last election, right? And probably the biggest single thing is housing, right? So all
house prices win elections in this country.
Yeah, well, in Ireland,
it depends for whom, right? If Labour went we'll go into the next election, I'm very, very confident, promising to build a lot more houses than the Tories, and whatever the Tories offer, it's going to be completely unconvincing because they've already dropped all those pledges 100 times, right? There will be cost of living measures that they are prepared to do that the Tories are not prepared to do because it will upset their base, and it will just be, and ultimately the political conversation in that final year will not be about the radical left versus the radical right or any of that, right? It will be about, we will do these incremental things for you, like, for example, windfall taxing energy companies. Now, that's not vaguely radical. It's not even slightly radical. It's what every country in Europe is doing. But the Tories, because they are so ideological in the other direction, they've made it easy for a centre party to do that. And I think that's what will happen.
Centre right.
That will push Labour up 1 or 2% into the,
Yeah, my main hope at the moment is the Korma police come and take him away. That's what I'm looking forward
to. Last word to you, William Kedjanyi.
Sorry, that's very pop-up.
Music going on there. A bit of Radiohead, a bleak.
I'm not playing anything. What's happening?
That's just beautiful.
That was the Korma police. They were just coming to get Keir. Arrest this man.
Police.
Oh my! Neil.
I kind of want to curry now.
On that note,
last word to you, William.
I think that I agree with both. I agree with all of you in the sense that the strategy Labour is employing has broadly worked. It's been pretty effective. They've gotten themselves, let's say, into the fights. They have a lead in that on average. The party's like key focus questions, is this party a different government? Is this party trusting the economy, etc.? They've all improved quite a lot since 2019. They have, I think, theoretically the chance to win an election, or at least to put Starmer in Downing Street. However, just that alone is not going to do. They will need to have some sort of compelling offer that goes with a narrative to get into number 10, I think. I wouldn't say we've seen that yet. I would say I think you can worry a bit. Maybe if you're a Labour supporter or you're on Labour long term, that Starmer might not have, you know, a sort of Blair-like vision to make it there. I think it's a perfectly reasonable concern. I think it's fair to say Labour could be going a bit further at the moment. But that said, who knows what the thinking in Southside is? Maybe they just want to hold back a bit and wait until closer to the election to go with big and bold stuff. I wouldn't necessarily be 100% sure that's what they're thinking of, but it's possible.
I'm pretty sure it's not. I can tell you what the thinking in Southside is. Can we kick some more people out? And how's that going to help us to win our factional battle inside the Labour Party? None of those people in Southside are interested in winning elections.
You've already had about 200,000 people, I think, leave the party.
They want them all out, all of them.
Death, taxes, and factional Labour infighting, basically.
An amazing
the British political tale. But Starmer's some way down the road. I still think it's important. I think he's got the chance to do it. I don't think he's just going to do it by saying Tories are bad or whatever, or I don't think he's just going to do it on sort of the competency angle. I think that's it's the politics of the early noughties for me. I don't think he'll get there.
NHS waiting lists. NHS waiting lists. Cost of living.
Yeah.
Right. They're a bunch of criminals, we're not. That kind of thing. A few really simple, easy things to do, and it will be enough.
The criminals, we're not. That's not going to work when the Korma police have been, you know.
Yeah,
I'm going to get done for that. I mean, that, can we just say there, what a bet, 3-1 on that he doesn't go this year. What a bet.
What price is he now, Paul? I haven't looked at that one for a couple of days.
About that. Well, I laid 3-1 on Betfair, or I laid 11-4-ish, that sort of thing on Monday night. I'm abroad at the minute, so I'm not mega on that. I think it's gone out to about 7-2, but it's just not going to happen. He's not going to go in 2022. No way.
He literally campaigned for the Police and Crimes Commissioner in Durham. He's photographed campaigning with her. She's not going to sack him.
There's no evidence that he's done anything wrong. It's so.
It doesn't matter whether he has or not. She's not going to give him a fight. There's no chance of it happening.
Politics. This is about the media can concoct a story, distract people, right? And there's nothing to it. You know, there's nothing behind this at all. No one's come up with any evidence at all that any rules are broken.
He did say at least 4 times on television that he had his curry and went straight back to work. But the itinerary clearly shows that after the curry's finished, they go back to the hotel.
I could say only in British politics could this sort of stuff be important to people's financial fortune.
The Korma police are pouring over this kind of information as we speak.
The whole subject is mental.
It's mental.
Just, you know, apart from anything, you've also got, look, all these fines issued today, right? 100 fines. You've got Sue Gray reports still to come. You know from everything they're saying that Dominic Cummings and the Vote Leave network are sitting on ever worse information to kill Johnson. And I mean, you know, it's just transparent what's happened here. You know, the people who hate Starmer, the right-wing press and his enemies in Labour.
By the way, just quickly, the people that hate Starmer, the people that hate Starmer, it's not just my flavour of Labour. The people he's really got to worry about are the people on the extreme Labour right. You know, Wes Streeting is not thinking, I hope he gets away with this. I love Keir Starmer. I want him to be Prime Minister.
I agree. Wes Streeting.
These people they're ready to get the knife in. Don't worry about that.
Just quickly, actually, as a sort of last word, because we'll discuss this a bit more next week. But Streeting's for the big mover for the next leader with us. He's 5-1 second favourite behind Andy Burnham. By the way, before everybody shouts to me, he can't run. I'm aware of that. It's a long-running anti-post market. I think people, when they were backing him, did not imagine that there would be any sort of remote chance Starmer would go. I think plenty of people might still think that. And in terms of actually the makeup, we've got Rayner at 8s, but more interesting probably are Nandy and Reeves at 9-1 and Yvette Cooper at 10s. I say that because that they would be candidates. I think the Labour extreme right would probably get behind one of them, right, Neil?
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
Can I just say about Wes Streeting, right? So that he represents my old manor, where I'm from, Ilford North.
Ilford South.
Ilford North.
North. Sorry, yeah.
Right, yeah. You know, I know a lot of people who still live in that constituency. Very few of them are Labour voters. None of them are Labour members. None of them are what I would call left wing. Right? They would all consider me to be some kind of communist, probably. You know. I've heard nothing but good things about him for 10 years. People who don't even know about politics saying to me, "Oh, I don't like Labour. I do like that West Street. He's a good MP. He's a good lad. He's a nice lad." He cuts through with the non-political people.
Yeah, and I hope the non-political people enjoyed the podcast. I have to say, Korma Police is just on my mind now, and I kind of want to curry. That was.
I have never flipped through all of my desktops so fast. just while sit you wondering what when I've been here. That's it. That's the perfect ending. No notes.
Arrest this man. I'll be back next week.
Dude, Neil, you got me there. You got
Thanks,
me.
guys.
Guys, okay, I'm going to
Bye.
get some...